listening to Southpod, Rise of a Region, hosted by Stanfield Gray and John Yarian.
Hello and welcome to Southpod. I'm John Yarian, the host, and I am pleased to be joined by author, strategist, influencer, futurist. Do we go that far?
Why not?
Okay, he'll take it. Soon Yu is joining me, and we are recording from Dig South itself, the conference. So if there's a little ambient noise, it's because good things are happening here. Thank you for joining me.
Sure, and to sort of be true to your new title you've just given me, I'm predicting this is going to be the best frickin' podcast ever, John.
It will. It certainly will. And I want to start with maybe an odd question, though, because introducing you is a little bit of a challenge. You're involved in a lot of things, and your voice is heard in a lot of different ways. And I wonder, how do you self-identify? I mean, when you look in the mirror, do you see an author? Do you see a thought leader? Do you see how would you self-describe what you're up to?
No, I think I am somebody who's very passionate about taking what's unknown and simplifying it and sharing it to the world. And so obviously that shows up in a lot of different forms, but I would always say that I'm a curious learner that loves to distill it to something that's simple and useful for other people to actually do something with it. And yeah, then that shows up as an author, it shows up as a speaker, it shows up as a consultant, but generally I love taking mystery and turning it into some heuristics.
Is that a theme in your career and your work? I mean, has that always been there, or did that appear later on as there were opportunities or platforms for you to explore that?
That's a really interesting question. Never been asked that before, so taking a moment to reflect, and the last 12 seconds have been a buy of time to try to figure out the answer.
I love the irony of this. You just told us your gift is simplifying things, and I've stumped you with a very simple question. I'm thrilled.
Well, you know, a bunch of thoughts came to mind. One, I think oftentimes you don't know what your calling is early on in your life. That's clear, and that's definitely my case. But through your life, you tend to do few things that help you kind of figure out what your purpose might be. One is, what do you enjoy doing, okay? And of what you enjoy doing, how can it touch more than you, okay? And I think when you find that combination of what you enjoy doing and that it helps other people, and then I would say the third component is you enjoy doing it, helps other people, and actually you have some skill in it. Because some people enjoy doing things that they have no skill in, and I don't think that's a good marriage, okay? But if you can find that combination of those three things, and life and all its turns and curves sort of helps I think, baptize you into that? Yeah, that's kind of what happened to me. And
well, for me as a very young child, I remember thinking I only want to grow up to host a mediocre podcast. I knew that from the very beginning, so our experience
you know what? You're you just delivered against that. You are like a vision and a man of mission and vision. You've married it and
I've
done
made
it.
good on that very medium aspiration. No, well, you know, part of what I think about when I consider your work, and particularly your writing, in this question of who you are or how you identify, I come back to the notion of an openness to being different, to being something else, that there's not a rigidity in what we do or how we apply our time, that we need to have a curiosity that moves us to something different. Is that fair? Am I putting words in your mouth, or is that?
No, I think that's absolutely a key theme in terms of staying relevant. I know that's one of the big themes here at Dig South, is this idea of relevancy. And if you're relevant only in one point of time about one sort of very set features or one segment or function or vertical, then I think it's hard to really stay relevant. But if you stay relevant to a truth, which is, like I said, what are you good at, what do you enjoy, what do people love you for? If you can sort of try to answer that question of that's why you're relevant,
right?
And then you keep innovating on that. You keep sort of saying, how might I improve that, and how might I have more fun with it? How might I get even better at it? And then, to your point, how might I reach more and more people with it? So earlier this year, literally beginning of this year, it was actually beginning of last year, I had 0 Twitter followers because I wasn't on Twitter. I had almost no LinkedIn because I wasn't doing LinkedIn. And I've obviously doing no speeches and all that. And all those things I realized if I wanted to reach more people with a message that I thought was important for them, I had to learn. And so I became an author, I became a speaker, I became somebody that is trying to influence through social media, but those are things I became because of what I was trying to do.
And that sounds a little bit sudden. I mean, did you literally wake up one day and go, okay, I have something to say? You know, this is an imperative for me. This is one of my success metrics. I need to be heard and make an impact through influence, or was it more gradual?
I think it was more gradual because, you know, I would say like most people, you go through life with certain things that you know you're good at, but also a lot of insecurities and a lot of fears. I used to think, even though you might see me on stage and see, wow, he must be a professional or a natural, right? You talk about this idea of natural talent. When I first started out, I had high anxieties getting up and speaking in front of people. I would, you know how we always have like multiple voices in our head? Well, I have a lot of them, and I had too many of them, and each one of them would be saying, why the hell would anyone want to listen to you? Another would be saying, oh, you just stumbled on that last word, and the third would be saying, that one person over there is not smiling, and all these voices would be talking to you while you're still trying to deliver something. And I got so swept up in those voices that I actually had a lot of anxiety doing public speaking. And it was only until I kind of woke up to the truth that, one, as an audience member, I actually want whoever I'm listening to be successful. I'm actually in their camp. That's point one. Point two, people are pretty forgiving as long as you're sincere about wanting to share something you think will help them and you're empathetic about it. They'll see that. And when I started to focus less on me and more about the audience and how I might help them, a lot of those fears and anxieties dissipated. But that took time.
Well, I think it's great advice to a lot of folks who may be listening to this and have a desire, they have a curiosity, they have something to say, but can really relate to what you just said. And what might be interesting would be to take a pause here and have you talk a little bit about your career and a little bit about the book, and make sure everybody's clear on who had those doubts, because it's not like you haven't done anything. I mean, you're a person who very much, they would think, belongs on that stage, right? Belongs on that platform. So maybe give us a brief recap of what you've been up to, what your career looks like, and then the book.
Sure. I'll begin with the fact that I've always been a bit schizophrenic. When I was in high school, I was trying to decide between a life as a electrical engineer or a fashion designer. So, very congruent, yes. But I came from a very conservative Asian family, and the thought of them paying for fashion school wasn't in the cards, John. It just wasn't. So I went to the path of least resistance, and I studied electrical engineer as an undergrad. I actually did very well from an academic point of view, but from a purpose and an interest point of view, I found it really hard to stick with it. And so then I think I spent the last 30 years of my life trying to go back to this idea of, design, and not just fashion, but, design in general. If you think about the early days, designers were the engineers. They were the problem solvers, and they just had a different point of view in terms of, it wasn't all about analytics, it was all about the human need and human condition, and how do we design better solutions around that. So I think I spent the last 30 years trying to get back to that, and that included obviously graduating with a double E background, working for 6 months for a chip manufacturer, one of the biggest competitors to Intel, AMD, and learning in that process that although I was halfway decent at designing chips, I was lacking in terms of social interaction and being able to deal with human drama, actually, which I really enjoy. And so I left that and then started to, then I went to consulting. And there was a lot of human drama there, but it was of the wrong type. I always felt I was in the wrong culture. There were a lot of, let's just say, people with big egos and very competitive. And again, it just...
I don't know anybody like that. That's foreign to my experience, but go on.
Well, the egos got to me, and so did the competitiveness. And I left that and eventually ended up in business school. And I knew coming into business school that the main thing I wanted to do is not necessarily go into investment banking or go into more consulting. I actually wanted to work for a widgets company, somebody making something so that I could actually understand what it was to make things and have people buy them and care about it. Ended up working for Clorox in the San Francisco Bay Area, selling toilet bowl cleaners and liquid plumber and soft scrub and a whole bunch of 409. And the key lesson I learned there is it really wasn't how sexy your product was. It was the fact that it was your product, and therefore you felt this strong sense of ownership for it. And that strong sense of ownership is something I really took away from my days of managing household cleaning products. And then I had the additional bug of saying, now that I've learned how to feel ownership and care about something that's my own brand, how might I create my own? And I left Clorox, and I had this retail concept in the back of my head, but I knew nothing about retail. So I left, and for a year I worked at Crate and Barrel, and I made $5 an hour. It was, I think one reporter figured it out. I was an 85% pay cut.
Wait, hang on. When you say worked at Crate and Barrel, you mean literally like hourly shift?
I had a
on
black
the floor,
apron.
That's not euphemistic, you worked at Crate and Barrel.
Yeah, I worked at Crate and Barrel. I wanted to learn
Okay.
the retail trade. I wanted to learn everything from obviously, servicing customers. I wanted to learn everything from stocking. I wanted to learn everything from the inventory count. So I did a whole year there to kind of learn the entire cycle, right? How difficult Christmas was, and the day after Christmas when people came in and wanted returns, and the pressure of having a 100-person line and trying to process all that. I got pretty good at wrapping glasses. So I went and learned retail. And while I was doing that, in the evenings I'd go home and start writing my business plan. And so eventually, through a lot of cold calling, a lot of rejection, got some folks to invest in an idea to build a retail store focused on folks that had allergies and asthma, a store to help you breathe happier and healthier called Gesundheit. And we launched the store, and because the store took like 12 months to build, we had time to do other things. So I said, we got all this merchandise, why don't we just go ahead and put it online? This was back in 98, 99, 98. And so the day we launched, we had a catalog, a e-commerce site, and the retail store. And all of a sudden, we started turning heads from people that said, oh, multi-channel, this bricks and clicks. And we became the poster child for bricks and clicks. And honestly, we accidentally fell into it. And we went from raising just $1 million to literally 2 months after the store opened, we got another like 5. And then literally within 6 months of that, we got 35 million. And so money was being thrown at us, and I got, like everybody else in that time, greedy. Our eyes were much bigger than our stomach. We were all looking at, hey, what's the end game? Could we become rich? And and it was all about this real estate land grab, right? Let's buy our customers. Let's spend $50 to get $10 of revenue, right? And I was really good at that, okay?
Yeah.
And obviously, what happened in 98, 99, big bubble crash. We were part of that. And so I had to do a couple rounds of layoffs. And anyway, so I had a huge career, or epic, both good and bad, in terms of doing startups. I actually was involved in about 5 startups. Some of them successful, some not. And one of the startups, actually Gesundheit, we had kept alive, actually. We brought it out of bankruptcy. We had investors that kept supporting it. And eventually it was actually purchased by Clorox. So I ended up back at Clorox, of all things, And then from there, I was recruited to lead innovation at Chiquita, which is the banana company, but really helped transform them from just purely commodity to go into value added. So we did packaged salads, we did packaged healthy snacks. And then from there, ended up at my most recent company, which was VF, a large apparel company with 30 brands like North Face, Vans, Timberland, Sem for Mankind, a whole bunch of brands. And then led innovation there for about 7 years. And then in that time, that's when I kind of came up with this idea of why were certain brands and businesses so successful at innovation, and why throughout my whole history had I been horrible at it, And through researching about 50 companies, I really found out that a lot of it had to do with not the fact that you don't have shiny new ideas, but where you apply them. And a lot of these companies applied it where they already had strengths, where they already had market momentum, where they had consumers and channels that loved them.
Well, this is like planning the way you would approach a horse race. You're just picking a winner, right?
Yes.
You're looking for the biggest, fastest horse, and the truth is you're over-investing, over-deploying, when what you need to be doing is reacting to need or innovation. You need to be looking in other places. Let me take a quick step back, though, because that was kind of an amazing journey you took us through. And I picked out a couple things that you didn't say explicitly, but that I heard. One of them was the courage to try different things. So there was what you were supposed to do, there's what you wanted to do, and you ended up leaving what you were supposed to do because it just didn't work. And that probably took courage. There was probably some stability in that, there was probably some predictability, and you walked away from it. In addition to courage, I heard something about hard work.
What's that about?
Something about hard work, right? So what I heard was during the day I put on an apron, and at night I worked on a business plan. That seemed to be a really strong theme throughout this journey.
And in the morning between 8 and 10 before the store opened, I made at least 50 calls, of which 48 of them weren't returned.
And this is the last one, and I'm glad you said that. The last piece of this that I'd love to hear you speak to is there's a theme of intellectual humility. Everything you've said has been more self-deprecating than self-aggrandizing. You've talked about screwing up and calls that weren't returned, and we assumed this and we got greedy. And that's so interesting to me that you have this critical eye on what has been and what could be. Does that keep you motivated? Does that ever get out of control? I mean, what's your relationship to that?
It's an interesting question, and one that I've had a lot of thinking about. And I've looked back in my history, and it's the times when I was probably the least resourced, where the odds were a bit against me, that I probably felt the most both scared but also the most courageous. Because courage isn't the lack of fear, it's actually full 100% acknowledgement of the fear, but then having the strength to face it and to try to overcome that. And so both, yes, those are the times when I was most in touch with my fears, but also most in touch with the energy and the strength to try to overcome those. I also found the times when things were going too well, and that happened like at Gesundheit. There was a period where everything was going well. We raised all this money, brought all these smart people in. They seemed to be running without me, and I got distracted, and that's when hubris crept in. And I look back at my whole life, and every time I've had an epic failure, almost every time, there's probably one time not, but almost every time I've had an epic failure, it was a strong correlation to when I was arrogant or got complacent or hubris.
Well, first of all, how dare you? We're at a conference. This is supposed to be about backslapping. This is supposed to be about Kool-Aid. This is about congratulating each other. And you're telling me there's danger in that. How dare you? That's a shocking notion.
No, I do worry. I even worry living in the Bay Area right now, where, and I don't, it's hard. I have friends who are very hardworking, and quite frankly, if you look at just based on the pocketbook and the scorecard of their financial statements, you would say they've done well, but not great. I have other friends who, quite frankly, haven't worked as hard, but they were in the right place at the right time. And so there's always that human disparity when you do that type of measurement. But I also say this, one of my friends told me this when I was probably at my lowest, after I had fallen from the point of the pinnacle all the way down to the bottom. She said this to me, people are kind of defined about what they talk about. And at the highest level, people talk about movements. And then below that, they talk about ideas. And then they talk about people. And the last place that they sort of fall down to is they talk about themselves. And she goes, I've been on a call for you for half an hour, and all you've been talking about is yourself. So that was a big wake-up call to get off my butt.
Good.
Get off my butt.
Really good.
And stop self-pitying, stop the self-pity and wallowing, and start changing the conversation and changing my frame.
If you're listening, rewind about 15 seconds, play it again, turn the volume up, remember that. That's going to be tough to top today. That's a really good quote. I want to do two things quickly and we'll get you out of here. So I know you got other stuff to do. Let's just briefly speak to your relationship to the South, if any. We're in it, and Dig South is interested in living and working in the South. Is it a place that you've lived in, visited, have family? What's the nature of your association to the South?
Well, I had the privilege and unique opportunity when I was at VF to live in Greensboro, North Carolina.
Great.
I consider that the South. Some
I
people consider it the sort of central South, I consider it
that's
South.
legit. That qualifies.
And that allowed me to obviously travel to South Carolina and to Georgia and to a whole bunch of places, and Virginia, West Virginia, all that. And so, so I spent 7 years living in the South. And I do miss certain aspects of the South. I miss the, I would say, the more genteel mindset.
Yep.
What I love is if through these years there's an ability to take what's best about tech and the new economy and the energy that comes from that and marry it with some of the qualities of the South, I think that might be the best of both worlds. One of my biggest fears, and I say this with full love and full disclosure of my love for the Bay Area, is that the Bay Area has gotten a little too entitled. It's gotten a little too, I think, crowded in the sense of having people that aren't sharing the same values. Some of them are mercenary. It only takes like 1 in 20 to actually have a huge impact on the other 19 in terms of what people experience on the traffic and the roads and even in interactions at a restaurant. So,
well, I don't think you're the first to break that ground, that there's a problem in that, and on a later podcast we'll talk about whether or not cities or communities can learn from other cities or communities. I think what's interesting for a Charleston, for a Charlotte, for a Raleigh-Durham, is to look at some of what's happening in these other cities that we aspire to as entrepreneurs and the way capital flows through them, but have other challenges that we don't yet, but we might. So we'll get back to that. Last thing though, we know the audience loves applicability, they love practicality, our listeners and watchers are doing stuff. Can you offer a couple practical tips? We've gotten great advice, but what would you say to somebody listening right now who is starting something up, who feels like maybe they're failing, who's looking for funding, looking for courage? What would you have them know?
Yeah, I think I'd provide one simple advice, and it'll apply on a very personal level and apply obviously to anything you're working on. And that's this. There are things that you are naturally already good at and that you like. Double down on those things. Make them your signature. Make them the business's signature, but also your personal signature. And it's better to be known for something great that you like to do than it is to be great at a whole bunch of things that you're sort of okay at, And it's okay if I think of John as probably the world's best South Pod broadcaster I've ever met. That's
Thank
okay,
you, that means
man.
a lot to me. Thank you.
No, but double down, and maybe if I just on our reaction, I think you're really good at having empathy and asking questions based on that empathy. You're really good at reflecting back about what I said and picking out both nuances and key moments, and you just did that a couple times in the podcast.
We end every pod with compliments for me, so this is perfect.
But I was going to say, that's your signature. The ability to go back and pick up the moments and the nuances that are actually ones that people should remember and we should talk more about.
Well, this works, though, because of your willingness to be vulnerable, to have a conversation, and I think that's where innovation and creativity comes from. There's an opening, a space there that I think speaks to all of your work and everything that you've achieved that I find really, really impressive. And before we go, remind us of the book and where we can buy it, where you earn the largest possible margin. Plug it.
I actually don't care about the margin. I just want people to read it because I want people to benefit from it. It's called Iconic Advantage, and obviously you can get it on Amazon, but you can find it at Barnes, and so, Amazon, that's pretty good coverage.
Leader, thinker, author, strategist, futurist. We just added that today. Soon you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John.
Thank you for listening to Southpod, Rise of a Region, where innovators dish on success, failure, and a rapidly evolving South.